picking up only on weekends due to limited flight options. McLean hopes upcoming tourism talks on July 24th will help reverse the trend. The event, titled Fuel of the Future, will bring together government officials and industry leaders to address the island's tourism challenges, including limited investment and airlift issues. Internationally, 8 babies in the UK have been born using genetic material from 3 people to prevent deadly mitochondrial disease. The technique uses a donor egg along with the biological parent's DNA and ensures the child inherits less than 0.1% of the donor's genes. Doctors say all 8 children are healthy and meeting development milestones. The breakthrough gives families at risk of passing on the disease new hope. UK scientists pioneered the process, which was legalized in 2015. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
Get ready for the biggest business-to-business event of the year. The Trade and Investment Convention, happening on July 17th to 19th at the Centre of Excellence in the Koya. Doors open from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on business days and 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Consumer Day. Dress code in effect for business days. Park and ride available from Constantine Park and UETGR North Car Park all days and NAM Devco on the 17th and 19th. Sponsored by the Ministry of Trade, Investment and Tourism, Exim Bank, Bal Roop Group and Bmobile Business.
WESN.
Welcome to Talking Points from the Sister Isle. Sean Michael Smaller here with what may not be breaking news for everybody, but this morning, as has been reported, at least online by one of the daily newspapers, as well as on radio, and will soon matriculate across all various media platforms, there has been a proclamation by the president on a state of emergency based on intelligence for a coordinated effort, a highly dangerous criminal network operating from within our prison system. And this network is actively, apparently or allegedly, mobilizing resources in order to initiate attacks against senior government officials and our national institutions. That is the proclamation, or part of it anyway. It has been signed to begin today by the President, Christine Kangaloo. And I guess for anyone that wants to think about any sort of conspiracy theories, just remember, this is technically speaking, at least in public perception, not a president appointed by the current administration. So President Kangaloo feels it is warranted for us to have a second state of emergency, more or less within a calendar year, basically. What does this mean going forward? Well, we'll have the conversations with Ashraf later today. There isn't necessarily much with regards to specifics outside of the media release from the TTPS that's pointing to certain things. It is particularly alarming that, again, this is coming from members, citizens of the country who are incarcerated in our prisons, who are apparently in control or directing the situation, orchestrating the situation. The media release has pointed to a critical enabler of this threat being the unauthorized trafficking of cellular devices into prison facilities by compromised personnel. So now we have on public record at least one concerning situation with the prison service and how our prisons are being run, being acknowledged as a critical reason for what is now a state of emergency. Ashraf did manage to send me the regulations It's all the same usual stuff. No word on a curfew, if any. Well, the media release actually says no curfew is recommended at this time. So we will see how things continue. Ironically, and again, drawing somewhat parallels to the last time Kamala Prasad was in office, the situation of the state of emergency is not too dissimilar. There was a plot, and arguably the state of emergency, you could say, either suppressed the plot or maybe the concerns of a plot back then under the partnership was overblown. Do we have a similar situation here? One thing I would caution people is this: you would rather take action and maybe suppress the situation and never really see anything happen than think, well, we're not entirely sure, and then something does happen. And potentially it can be bad, because I have been saying what used to be sacred in the past may no longer be sacred anymore. Although I don't think anyone who would have agreed with me would have thought that criminal gangs may have been looking to escalate situations and targeting essentially our systems of government by going after officials and institutions. But myself included, that wasn't necessarily what came to mind. What came to mind for me was political rhetoric and the potential for political violence. But now, for whatever reason, I don't know if the gangs are caught up in the politics, whether directly or indirectly. Just because they're caught up in the politics doesn't mean that politicians are directing them. They might just be hearing things from afar and looking to make decisions on their own. We don't know. We don't know a lot of what's going on. This is one of those things where we may never know. If jobs are done right, we may never know. This is just one of those tricky situations. But we'll have more on this later when I speak to Ashraf and Ashraf comes in. I do need to get through some stuff throughout the week, so please bear with me. One of the things, tragedy has struck the missing young lady, Candice Honore. She was found. I'm not going to say how she was found. It's gruesome enough. You could see it. It's front page news, at least in one daily newspaper. It's probably would have been the big story of the day if not for the state of emergency. The situation is very distressing. It's just one of those reasons why I don't look to track every murder or missing persons. Unfortunately, and this seems to be a trend, I can't say if this is every missing person case where there really is a low expectation of the victim being retained alive or found alive, but generally speaking, there's something about when women go missing, and it really makes me uneasy that this is the result. Essentially, it's disguised as a kidnapping. It's really a murder. I don't think there was any ransom demands here. There was no mama gain. I'm not sure if forensics will be able to determine the time of death in order to ascertain exactly what the timeline was of the crime, but given the nature of how a body was discovered, it makes me think there's at least one lead. It'll be interesting to see if anything comes of that, but I can't imagine how disappointed everybody must feel like on this situation, and not entirely sure what can be done in the short term outside of, in the long run, one would hope culturally we would have to do something to address this, regardless of what law enforcement does, because culturally, this being behavior someone decides to do for whatever reason, however justified they think they are or not, or it is very difficult for the TTPS to intervene proactively in cases like this. They could react, and then you could potentially capture the murderer having faced consequences, and the consequences, successful consequences, are what discourages deviants who would otherwise do this. But that only works in some cases. That only works for those who actually care about the consequences. And one of the issues with these types of crimes is that not always does the perpetrator care about these types of consequences. In fact, sometimes they kill themselves right after. So this is assuming it is domestic and it's not some sort of nefarious criminal scheme. There's one suspect that suggests it's domestic, but again, innocent until proven guilty. I don't have evidence. I can't assume that is to be the absolute truth. So we'll have to wait and see. This is one of those things where you hope that the investigation could bring justice for the family. Do you expect it to happen? Well, I don't, to be honest. But I've been wrong about things like this before, and I would be more than happy to be completely dead wrong about this case now. There was a press conference last night. Won't get into all of it. Will kind of veer into the politics a little bit. I'll say that Saddam Hussein actually presented himself well. The defense for the current administration on what one reporter brought up, similar talking points to what I have said before. You're basically pointing out that the PNM did this and the PNM did that with regards to appointments and nepotism and friends of friends and friends and family and all of these things. And now you're appointing UNT people to positions. And the defense was that, well, no, we were talking about big millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollar deals. I don't buy it. That sounds like a lot of semantics, especially since when on the campaign trail they were making accusations, they did not always limit it to specific high or large big money deals and specific individuals with specific accusations. At times they generalized it, and they were happy to, because by generalizing it, it will imply a wide net, even if they could legally say, oh, well, we didn't actually mean all of this. We were just referring to our specific allegations that we may have specified at X, Y, and Z. Now, I think it's kind of disappointing, and we have to, it's one of those weird positions where not everything the government does is bad, but that's kind of how it starts. That's kind of how it started under the PNM. That's kind of how it started under the partnership. That's kind of how it started under Mr. Manning's last term, and so on and so on. So the whole race talk over state board appointments, the problem is the government needs to do a better job than the PNM, the opposition, from understanding it's not what the truth actually is. And it's not what the truth is that you perceive it to be. But sometimes with things like this, it's how the public perceives it. And no amount of being mad at the public and mad at the media for pointing it out is going to change the fact that it will be perceived as racist. There's a political analyst that basically says race still drives state board appointments in one of the daily newspapers. I'll say The Guardian, right? It's not just the PNM. So the ball is in the government's court, because this is what the previous administration did. They acted as though they didn't understand why everybody around them was unreasonable. But the problem is, it's not that it's unreasonable. Whether it's the truth or not, whether you could say in your heart of hearts that race was not a factor, and maybe it's politics, but I said it yesterday, it will come across as race. It will be perceived as race by the public. And more politically savvy people will understand that and will put things in place to prevent that. But maybe we're asking too much of political neophytes whose experience is only being attack dogs on the opposition bench and not actually governing. It's easy to criticize. And I say that in understanding the full irony of me saying that statement. It's easy to criticize, and when you're not actually having any skin in the game, when you don't have to make the decisions. And that's one of the reasons why I try to be fair, and at times caution people, let's not go too far in our criticisms if it's potentially unreasonable. All right. Quick, let's go daily review. So, of course, there is a state of emergency. Not to get too much into it, as the news unfolds, we will try to provide more here on WSN, the Content Capital. A high-level threat response group from various arms of law enforcement was established with a specific mandate to treat this threat and its actors. Emergency briefing was given to the Prime Minister and Attorney General last night. So this is all very immediate. Again, there was a post-cabinet press conference. None of this came up. The Minister of Homeland Security was at the press conference. Cabinet was still meeting while the press conference was going on. So the immediate steps, they were going to remove and relocate key incarcerated individuals. They're trying to disrupt the control that they have over criminal enterprise. And it seems as though they're looking to target the various entities. The strange thing is, organized crime in this country is tiered. Of course, there's the big drug operations, but then there's the street gangs, but the street gangs are really like traditional street gangs with limited organizations. We're not talking Bloods and Crips, MS-13, or even Trendy Aragua when we're speaking about our local street gangs. Our local street gangs are literally just a group of fellas from a block, not necessarily well organized. So it's curious as to who the organization or the entity was that is allegedly threatening this whole situation. Right? Targets include senior police officers, members of the judiciary, personnel within the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, which gives credence to the DPP's concerns over his office that the previous administration wanted him to occupy that building. Officers of the prison service, and, well, we'll see. So far, political figures have not necessarily been highlighted. But it's somewhat chilling that not only is it coming from incarcerated individuals calling shots, but that it is multiple descriptive words orchestrating a structured campaign involving multiple criminal entities, which then, I guess it begs the question, is this the unfortunate side of our poor immigration and illegal immigration problem? And Trendy Aragua is allegedly here since 2018. Could Latin American criminal transnational organizations be part of this? And our people, criminals, yes, but still our people, are essentially the triggermen and the middlemen and the fall guys and the patsies. We have to wait and see. Now, I do want to just speak about the whole situation with, moving on to the next story with CPEP. A lot of stories piled up over the week and I haven't gotten to them. I'm not going to probably speak on everything, especially given light of the situation. Don't want to spend too much time on it. Just that it goes back, it's a similar situation to the state boards. And I was kind of pointing it out. And again, there are a lot of things that MP Gonzalez says, I don't like how he says them. Like, I really do not like how he says them. But there are times when the opposition said things I had to acknowledge back when the UNC was in opposition. Despite the fact that there were a lot of things that the UNC said that I really didn't like. So now, what's fair is fair. The CPEP situation comes across as extremely political. Extremely. And it's similar to the WASA situation. The UEDB campus, in the press conference, they now said they're now looking into what needs to be done, right, to renovate the campus and get it open. Look how long that process is taking, right? And with regards to at least some state board appointments, they're saying we're going through the process. We're trying to find the best people involved. Now, again, that already is in dispute with regards to how race is being perceived on the state board appointments, right? So the fact that they're taking their time and leaving no stone unturned and trying to find the best candidates to run these entities, these important positions, that's already being disputed. But let's say it's not. Let's assume that it's not, that they're actually doing a job based off of a meritocracy process, based process, right? how did it seem like, one, with regards to WASA, they declared their predetermined position and their predetermined actions even before winning the election. So that had no fact-finding mission at all. And two, with regards to CPEP, we didn't hear anything about what was uncovered, the investigation undertaken. It was literally just dropped on us. They moved so fast, allegedly, according to the most generous interpretation of their own actions. They just forgot to mention the month payoff, the month severance that they would offer to the CPAP workers now, which apparently has not been paid. So when Minister Paderak wants to come now and says things like he won't preempt the CPAP board, well, I mean, you're appointing the board. At this point, in this case, who is going to reasonably say they are not? Because given the situation, look, and then there's the URP project manager, who's the former UNC campaign manager. Gerald Ramdeen being appointed head of the NGC doesn't have experience at the very least, right? Appointments like that will cause people to start to suspect things and assume things. And then given how CPAP was handled, who believes the CPAP board is going to be speaking on their own, and who thinks it's going to be a mouthpiece for cabinet? Which is essentially what we thought about board appointments and other senior appointees done by the previous administration. And I do wonder if this points to a systemic weakness in how we do our business, right? So there's corruption allegations on URP. There's corruption allegations with CPEP. With regards to URP, Minister Khadija Amin is leading the URP side of the situation. And listen, I get it. I understand. The problem is when you then appoint a UNC campaign manager in a position on URP, I understand that both things can be true. But to the general public, you undermine all of the righteous indignation you have over the issue, all of the moral high ground you have over the issue, all of the arguments you have on this issue. You undermine it. Now, mileage may vary based on individual perception. For me, what it looks like is you have a very real issue, but while addressing it, you're also playing politics. And I don't appreciate it. That's how it looks. That's one thing. The approach dealing with flooding was highly appreciated. But that bold, direct, decisive approach, even that had more communication to the public than I think this. That made sense at least. I don't know if it's a unilateral decisions on that end and you're just operating the same way now with URP and it's not coming across. It's not coming over very well. And I just wanted to highlight, because there's a lot of articles on this, but I can't get into all of it. But the Minister of Labour, as I said before, Leroy Batiste, he says he has concerns over recent job losses. That's nice. That's nice. But I do wonder what he would say about this and what the unions would say about this if the unions didn't have a partnership with the government, if the unions didn't join with the coalition of interests, if the unions didn't have members of the unions in parliament as ministers. And again, we want to talk about nepotism, right? And Saddam Hussein tried to play it off as though it was, well, the difference of scale made it justifiable, because he said we were talking about, I don't know if it was millions or hundreds of millions dollar deals with family members of PNM cabinet ministers. Well, there's a cabinet minister whose wife got a job. It doesn't matter how well the process was done. A former labor leader's wife got a job. There will be a perception of a conflict of interest. It's inescapable. It's one of the reasons why in certain jurisdictions, when people go to high office, it's just understood, hey, friends and family, those too close to me, y'all might lose out for a little while. It all depends on how you handle the situation. And I don't know if the current administration has a handle on it. Let's take the comment one time as it's on this topic. I can't recall if I ever supported the PNM on the matter of race. When the media stuck in the race card for its own agenda, then must speak out. Marvin Gonzalez, quote is clearly being used to stir up racial hatred. Gonzalez said if you went to Raleigh with a board composed mainly of Indo-Trinidadians, that is the question Raleigh would ask him. If you went to a board composed mainly of Afro-Trinidadians, Raleigh would ask him if you were living in Nigeria. He claimed that Raleigh wanted balanced boards. Now look, listen. It's not that the news are using the quote to stir up racial hatred. News is a business, unfortunately, because the old model was essentially news was a loss leader. I have news to make my station look respectable and presentable and to make me seem like a major player in the game. I'm not gonna make money off of news. But media now can't afford that like how it used to. What they're doing is they're not stirring up racial hatred. It's negative press, it's controversial statements. They don't care if you agree with Marvin Gonzalez or not, but they want to put it out there because it's strong, it's controversial, and it will capture people's interests. Now, the ethics of that could be debated, but I don't have time for that. With regards to, I don't agree with him using the statements to speak on the situation with regards to we looking like if we from Bangladesh or Delhi, right? I don't agree with that because then it takes what could be a constructive conversation of a very real racial issue and it just pushes it into a bacchanal situation where you are throwing your own barbs at the situation that are more emotional insults and arguments rather than factual, hey, this may be a problem, what are we going to do about it, right? So Rowley wanted balanced boards. Yes, I think the PNM tried to appear balanced. I think they did that mostly for politics because they understood how optics mattered in 2025. I'm not saying they did it because they were the most benevolent group that ever ran the country. I'm saying they were politicians that maybe had a little bit more political awareness than the current administration, or at least some of the current mouthpieces of the current administration. Because notice who speaks on this on behalf of the government and who does not, or at least on a regular basis. All right. I just want to get into another topic, and I'll also maybe, moving on, I'll also maybe speak on this with Ashraf. Stakeholders, firearm dealers, range operators, and their lawyers, and so on, they want to reform the FUL system, and the picture there shows presenting Minister Alexander with, I believe it's a 21-page, presenting with a document of their proposals, right? Some of which I'm not too sure I fully agree with. Some of it seems to be practical. So having smart cards carry biometric data, firearm serial numbers, and so this is basically, ironically, another form of ID and personal information tracking. They also want to try to have the government have dialogue with the Americans with regards to export restrictions, right? To some extent, we have to get our private firearm users as well as law enforcement needs to practice shooting. And then also the firearm range operators and gun instructors, it's their livelihood. There's also sport shooters. There's one of the papers reported it differently to another. One paper is reporting that they're recommending the legal age for firearms for sport shooting be reduced so that the sport could, I guess you could say, start younger, develop talent more easily. But then another daily newspaper said one of the recommendations is to decrease the age of FULs to 18. I think a blanket statement. I'm not entirely sure which one is more accurate. To me, that seems a little crazy, except I do believe you can be a police officer at 18. But the flip side is what makes it a difficult sell at this time is the fact that they've increased the age limit for drinking and smoking weed. One wonders if the driving age limit, if they would dare touch that, because we've reached that point, and the voting age limit, if they dare touch that, because we've reached that point. Like, how is it that certain adult responsibilities are fine and others are not? One of the things that they do want to do, they want to standardize criteria for FULs and have a firearms licensing board. I don't know how easy that is, because some of the things, like some of the investigations on good character and stuff like that, is subjective, because the moment that somebody uses a private legal firearm in a crime, the process will come under scrutiny, especially if you potentially take the subjectivity out and then it said, well, he did pass all of the metrics. And then one of the other things with our licensing board is, we have one of the practical issues we have is the demand of FULs and the backlog. And having a board having to meet and discuss on these things might make the situation actually take longer. Now, I don't know if that's a bad thing necessarily, but it might not meet the demands of the public, and to some extent, you listen to what the public wants or what the public needs or what should be done. But I'm not, the other thing is, to some extent, the commissioner in theory has more independence than a board, which potentially, if we move to a board, that board will have the power, but the government will have the power to disappoint the board. So I'm not too sure, like, it will be more politically tied to the administration, like what we see with, at times, the Police Service Commission and other state boards, than the police commissioner. Believe it or not, right? Believe it or not. As little as it appears to be, the police commissioner might be more independent than a board. So anyway, let's end things there. We'll welcome Ashraf, state of emergency. Second one in a year. I'm not even too sure how the law treats with that. But stay tuned. This is Talking About NWS, and we'll be right back after this.
Get ready for the biggest business-to-business event of the year, the Trade and Investment Convention, happening on July 17th to 19th at the Center of Excellence in the Koya. Doors open from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on business days and 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Consumer Day. Dress code in effect for business days. Park and ride available from Constantine Park and UETGR North Car Park all days, and NAMDevco on the 17th and 19th. Sponsored by the Ministry of Trade, Investment and Tourism, Exim Bank, Bal Roop Group and Bmobile Business.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
Struggling with heart health or frequent migraines? Discover the simple steps to reclaim your energy and vitality.
We're diving into a topic that affects about 422 million people around the world: diabetes.
Tune into Wellness Unlocked, the series that delivers expert advice, practical tips, and inspiring stories to help you take control of your health and well-being. Your health matters. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and take the first step toward better health.
we're back on talking about the WSND Continental Show. Michael Small coming to you from Tobago, joined by one retired inspector, Ashraf Ali, joining us from our studios back in Trinidad. Ashraf, good morning.
Good morning, Sean, and I want to say it's very, like I always say, there's never a dull day in the police service, never a dull day in Trinidad and Tobago.
It's, apologies if you're hearing the hammering. I don't think I could do anything about that. But that said, there's a state of emergency. The state of emergency came with a media press release. It seems as though, Ashraf, just the timeline of this, sometime last night, we're not too sure if it was during the cabinet meeting. It might have been potentially during the press conference, the post-cabinet press conference, which technically was not post-cabinet because cabinet was still meeting during the press conference. The police or law enforcement took intelligence to the Prime Minister and the AG and essentially got the ball rolling that ended up with the President proclaiming a state of emergency starting from today. Now, we haven't necessarily heard from the Minister of Homeland Security, the Prime Minister, the Attorney General, the Minister of Justice, technically just the President by proclamation. And we haven't heard from the Police Commissioner. And you brought up the fact that given what's in this press release, this might not have been the best move with regards to communicating the situation to the public. Care to explain further?
Yeah, Sean. So, like I said, this is what is a prime example of what not to do in a crisis management situation. This situation, when you listen to what is being mentioned in the media release, this should not have been a media release. It should have been a media release post a briefing, because it is given information about specific type of intelligence that required a state of emergency. In my opinion, it appears that from when I read in the day, the Office of the Commissioner said that they stated that they would have informed or advised the Prime Minister and advised the Minister of Justice. I am saying, if that is the case, then that is not for the public to know that you are advising the Prime Minister on this. I am simply saying that if all the bodies responsible should have come together and have a one unified media brief indicating the reason why this state of emergency is being proposed or has been initiated, because we already have a bitter taste of the last state of emergency, and we are still asking the question, what was the purpose of that state of emergency without a curfew? Now, in this state of emergency, they say there is no need for a curfew. But is it that you are saying right now that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is not capable of treating with the current situation, and the only option they have is a state of emergency to address the situation because of the extended powers that you need? Well, then, if that is the case, then the intelligence said that you need additional powers to treat with the nature of the state, the nature of the threats. So come out and say that. Nothing, in my opinion, is not in a media brief. In a media communication like this, it should have been a personal communication by the commissioner in a media brief as early as this morning or 7 o'clock this morning before this communication reached out.
Well, wouldn't have it been even better given the nature of a state of emergency? It should have been a media briefing that not just had the commissioner, but the Prime Minister as well. And potentially Minister of Homeland Security. Like, everybody should be there, you know, but it almost seems like, oh, well, it's our bedtime now, so no senior official is available. Somebody just type up a press release and we'll send it out. Like, I when you think about it, right, there's no senior person that is to treat with this, that has any sort of authority over this. We have yet to hear from them. They have just dropped a state of emergency on us. And the thing is, if this was to try to catch criminals by surprise, I don't know if it really is working out that way. Because that's one thing from the last one, where it seemed as though they declared things before it was ready. And the concern was the element of surprise to kind of hit the criminal networks was lost because you kind of just declared, hey, we're coming after you, before you were ready to actually go after them in any significant way. But
at the end of the day, when you look at the media release, the information is speaking specifically to a particular organization that in my opinion, you are now saying has become very compromised because they have threats emanating from that organization. The individuals in that organization who are supposed to be under scrutiny or have been or are there through a legal from a legal perspective is criminal elements we're talking about. They have been deprived of their liberties, and you are telling me that they have access to create a network of communication both internally and externally to carry out certain other criminal actions. And we have not heard, and this media really, I'm still waiting to hear in our official media release how they are going to treat with the intelligence that they presented to the public. Because we are saying that if the persons in that organization is compromised, then why are they still in that location? So then they may have to remove those persons who are considered to be compromised. How many are compromised? Because you're talking about internal and external. That's how it was mentioned in the media release. Internal and external networks. And you understand, they're leveraging internal and external networks. So that speaks volumes.
My thing is, we have official acknowledgement. It says a critical enabler of this threat has been the unauthorized trafficking of cellular devices into prison facilities by compromised personnel. This is on the record, and not just on the record like somebody had a memo. This is a official press release, right, from the TTPS to explain a state of emergency. And in this document, it says the prison service is compromised to the degree that it is a contributing factor, a major contributing factor to the state of emergency. At this point, I don't know how no one has reached the point where saying, obviously, something isn't just wrong. We have gone past now any criticisms you could have of the TTPS, any criticisms. We've probably gone past this now because now it has become so blatant and the scale of the issue has become so big that it has become part of an official communique to the public. It's not even an internal memo or anything like that. It's not like a letter from one government official to another. No, official documentation for something this severe. In my mind, if we don't see major shakeups in the prison service, it's very difficult then to take law enforcement seriously moving forward. Because I think, as you were pointing out, we are not talking about the criminal enterprise out there, hiding amongst the public, hiding in the hotspots. We're talking about people already arrested. We can't even prevent convicted people who are already arrested from committing crimes. We're going to stop the Joe public out there from committing crimes? And how does that work?
I want to say it is extremely worrying. And for those who don't believe it's worrying, it is extremely worrying. No, I want to say that we may not agree, or we could agree to disagree on the manner in which the information was shared to the public. But I want to give the Commissioner of Police kudos. I mean, he did in fact step up to the plate and say, listen, this is the situation I am facing in the organization, and this is the information that we are facing right now, and this is the action that needs to be taken. We may not agree on the manner in which it was done, but I believe this is the first time acknowledgement of such a critical situation has been presented to the public by a Commissioner of Police. Right? So I know he may want to do things differently, so it's something different that we have never, or should say we are not accustomed seeing information being so forthright coming to the public as to why actions are going to be taken. So you have to look at it both sides. So it's not about criticism on one hand alone. It's about understanding that there may be value in why and how this information has been shared and why it is shared in this manner. So there are two perspectives towards it.
Well, here's another thing though, because this is the second state of emergency for the year, basically, right? I mean, the first one was technically declared at the end of December, if memory serves correct, but essentially, second one for the year, right? And I don't think this is politicking because, again, the current president is not that close to the administration that she could be part of any sort of political conspiracy. So there's probably something there, which then makes me think, what is it about our laws and standard operating procedures and burden of proof and legal requirements on the police service that what should or otherwise be normal law enforcement functions in other parts of the world, for Trinidad and Tobago, at some point we need a state of emergency because our laws and our regulations just don't allow police to police. That's what it seems like to me, that the extra powers are needed to deal with situations like this, whereas arguably whenever they have any sort of things like this in the United States or in the UK, you don't always hear them declare state of emergency for emergency powers. Especially if we have intelligence, we will take the intelligence and turn it into actionable evidence. Usually you get a state of emergency when you have an immediate danger, yes, but also when you're unable to utilize normal police powers to investigate and to make arrests and to gather evidence and what have you. And usually I think it's one of those things where they might be behind the ball, but in this situation, it seems like we're ahead of the curve. We got wind of the situation. They apparently know, at least to some extent, which prisoners are calling the shots on this matter, assuming that they are the ones calling shots and there's not instructions from some higher criminal authority. So one would have thought, well, in a normal police situation with a working criminal justice system, you get intelligence on something like this, you could put things in place and head it off at the pass. You don't need this because that's the thing. If the normal police system was working properly, you could start investigating these things and you're not giving away all of the information that you're looking into these things, that, hey, you're under scrutiny, that, hey, we caught wind of you. So now we've declared a state of emergency. The criminal element has been sufficiently warned to go to ground, which is what they did at the beginning of this year. All of the automatic rifles disappeared. You know, the violence was suppressed because they knew now is not the time to do this. But a couple of weeks ago, they pulled out the rifles and they gunned down a group of people a couple of times. What? So this heavy-handed approach, you lose the element of surprise, and it's worrying that the implication is our normal laws just aren't good enough.
Well, yes and no to some extent. The question is, we don't know the full extent of the intelligence. It's just a snippet of what is happening. So it's unfair to say that actions cannot be taken or actions have not been taken to reach to this stage. So making judgment will be unfair. But speaking from some level of experience, when dealing with intelligence, sometimes intelligence is not of evidential value for you to go before the courts. And they did not say evidence; they said intelligence. Now, we have over the years had intelligence that may or may not have been treated in the manner that it should have been treated. And unfortunately, it was not timely, and we lost some judicial officers, right? And it's unfortunate. We have prison officers who were targeted, and based on this information that is coming out on the media release, it's specifically stated that there are officials within the judiciary, law enforcement, and the prison services that have prison service and other organizations that have been or is the subject of some criminal act or targeting, to be targeted. I believe that this is not preemptive, and it's not about giving your hand out, but informing persons that, yes, listen, the severity of the information or the nature of this information is not something you just get up in the morning and say you want a state of emergency. It is because of certain type of information, very critical and very worrying, that if such an action is allowed to occur, the implications or the further implication on how we intend to treat with or could we effectively treat with securing our country, because we know for a fact, I mean, there are criminal elements there who within the prison system over the years have been, as I say, calling hits on the outside, right? And only after the fact you're hearing about it. I am saying, listen, in this circumstance, the threat is real, and based on the fact that the threat is real, actions have to be taken. The sad reality of it is our laws are not as strong as we believe. From normal policing, you don't have the authority or the power to go into someone's house without a warrant and do certain actions. Based on this type of intelligence, you may need this level of flexibility with the state of emergency powers, that the additional state of emergency powers, to collect evidential evidence in certain aspects also. So it work in both ways, right? So, but I think we need to wait. Let's see how this is going to play out, because this information is very, it just, how you should say, it's like a ton of blocks, a ton of brick. It hit everybody this morning like a ton of brick. Nobody really understood what is taking place and how it's taken. So the officials, the persons in authority has to come to us and say, hey, listen, this is the reasons why we're doing certain things. So I am eagerly awaiting to hear what is taking place.
Hoping for a press conference to happen soon. We do have a caller from Cascade. We'll take the call and then continue conversation. Good morning, caller, you're on here.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
We have to commend the Attorney General and the Prime Minister, or the other way, Prime Minister, the Attorney General, for taking this action early. It must be that they are acting on information that they would have received from all the security arms of the country, be it the prison, the police, the military, you name it. And I am sincerely hoping that on this occasion, because you know we've had state of emergencies last year and this year, I'm sincerely hoping that on this occasion, this state of emergency gives the people, the population, the kind of rest that is required from criminals and criminality in this country. It gets too much of it, and if it requires a state of emergency to bring an end to fellas standing up and sending over into the royal jail, God alone knows what, whether it's cell phones or drugs. If it takes a state of emergency to do that, then I can only support it. But I'm praying that we will be kept apprised by the security forces and the government as we go along. It can't be that there will be an absence of information flow to needy people, so that we will be in a position to better understand and lend support. The population must lend support to the government and the forces if we hope to bring an end to the crisis that and the cancer that has been destroying this country for the last 20 years. I rest my case. Senior, you want to ask me anything?
The caller was asking if you have anything to ask.
No, I don't think so. I do have some questions to ask you, but that's more on a speculative nature based on your experience, Ashraf. But no, Mr. Cascade, thanks for the call and for making the point. Yes, we do need more information. Ashraf and I would have preferred it from the jump, but you know what? There could have been practical reasons why it was rolled out this way, and at the very least, a press conference that could happen sooner rather than later would go a long way to ensuring that, you know, the public knows or has a better awareness of what's going on. One of the things, Ashraf, that I found, that I thought about last night was the current government was elected to some extent, to a significant degree, based on the strength of Kamala Persad-Bissessar. And her not being at post-cabinet press briefings kind of is slightly disappointing. Now, Saddam Hussein said, well, she'll be at the Monday night briefings. But the point is, she has the goodwill of the people, not necessarily her party, right? Or at least not everybody in her party. And then now, with a situation like this, I think a lot of the public wants to hear from her. If it's just Minister Alexander, no matter, yes, he's popular in his own right, and he is seen as credible in national security issues in his own right, obviously. But he's not the Prime Minister. And there have been similar complaints about, one, the opposition leader not being in Parliament for debates, current opposition leader, and two, the former Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, when he was absent at times. And I think you don't even need that. This situation is different in the sense that a lot of the public goodwill, interests, faith is wrapped up in the Prime Minister. This is one of the consequences of how she managed the internal politics of a party. It was successful, but now the problem is you can't center all the power around yourself and hold on to it, right? And we appreciate you make good decisions with that power, with the cabinet for the most part, and as you've transitioned into becoming the government, we appreciate all of that. But now trying to delegate it doesn't work quite that well. You can't just throw them off on the deep end and hope the public accepts them fully. We do have a call on WhatsApp, so I'm gonna have to ask you to wait, Ashraf. We'll take the call. Good morning, caller, you on here?
Good morning, Sean. ASP Ashraf.
Morning.
Morning.
A couple of things. People have to be patient because I know for a fact the Prime Minister was working basically in the late hours of last night. And I suspect all of this was part of the decision-making process. Now, the previous state of emergency, how many guns did they get off the street? They were saying that there were 12,000 guns somewhere around the place. During the state of emergency, they got 700, they got 800. So that is less than 5%. So you have 95% of the guns there. Now, let's listen. There was a lot of criminals who went to the UK seeking asylum. A lot of the information is out there, the Daily Telegraph and everything, costing 65,000. The UK intelligence apparatus, I am sure that they would have been monitoring those people inside out. There is in the public domain that these people over there, including the financiers, will communicate. So I suspect there is a capture of that information. Our newly minted COP said he has an extremely good relationship with foreign actors, the FBI, ATF, etc. I basically believe he is using all that information, all that contact to justify this. I believe this came of his volition, his basic idea of what is happening, his intelligence, competency of what is happening. I suspect that he has gone to cabinet and said, look, this is my information, this is where it comes from, we have to act now. Remember the 2011 issue with the CEO. There was a gentleman by the name of Crawford who the intelligence police identified as one of the perpetrators of something nefarious on the Prime Minister. 2 months after, he migrated and he died in Iraq, and everything came out. So the police, Trinidad TTPS, has the basic tools to gather information. Now they have an issue because the previous Prime Minister said the SSA and all sort of things was destabilizing the country. Now, I believe a lot of the international actors are serious about helping Trinidad. That is all. I'll go and have a nice morning.
Thank you, caller. Ashraf, it brings up an implication or speaks to an implication that I had earlier. The help we get from international agencies are needed because of the transnational crime in TNT. I wonder how reasonable, based on what you've seen in the past and your judgment, should we consider some of this might be transnational criminals, not just indirect influence that we copying them and or being influenced by them, but like directly, perhaps they might be encouraging us to have a hand in this in some way or another. Because one would imagine something like this would be very disruptive to criminal activity throughout the country in the sense of the release said that the scale of this situation was so big that they needed the normal law enforcement response wasn't sufficient. So it implies that it's not necessarily about the deficiencies, but rather just how severe this situation is. And something like that, one would imagine it could be very, very disruptive for any other criminal activity. So they potentially may be in on it.
Before I answer, I think we have a call from Diego Martin.
All right, okay. We'll take the call and then keep that question in mind.
Sure.
So I don't have to try and remember it again. Diego Martin, good morning, caller.
Yes, thank you very much for taking my call. It's very interactive and informative. You all do a good job. I want to agree with that previous caller. People's calling for the Prime Minister to say something. But I think in this sensitive, highly charged political situation, the Prime Minister, at the end of the National Security Council, has to be careful. The Prime Minister will be advised of this threat by national security experts. And she, as head of the government, cannot jump out and just come and make statements. She will have to allow the national security heads to have a press conference and say something what is happening. And from that, then she will come at some time soon and address the nation. Because of the fact that the population will want to hear what the government thinks about what is happening. I agree with you that this is very uncomfortable time and people will want to hear from the government. But the national security heads have to come and say what is happening, and it will be some inconvenience to the public because of all the traffic that is happening for the last few weeks. This could be the result of all these things. So I'm just saying, we all love Trinidad and pray that everything turned out well for the safety of Trinidad and the people. Thank you very much.
All right. Ashraf, I'm not sure if you got all that.
Yeah, I did. And it's true, the caller is right in the context that we have to see we have to give it some chance because there's a lot of things that is in play that we are not aware of. Now, to answer your question, based on the extent of criminal networks, and if it is that the Commissioner of Police indicating that based on the intelligence that they would have gathered from the intelligence arms, that the extent of the network needs specific or a more robust level of policing, which a state of emergency may be able to give with that additional powers, then it means that it is not that they are not able to address the situation, it's just that the nature of the situation, as you mentioned, may need special circumstances to address. And the state of emergency will give you that opportunity to deal with it. Now, when you're dealing with the persons within the prison system, it is one aspect of how we're going to treat with that. But when you have elements from outside who are who you're not fully aware of, or who have been given taskings to do certain aspects of this activity, it means that you have to work really. You have to be working overtime, literally working overtime and way beyond the scope on thinking out the box on how to address these type of things, because they are not going to tell you who they're going to target today and when they're going to do it. They're looking for opportunities. So these are some of the, it means that the intelligence that they have, and I think because of the nature of that information that was given to the commissioner, and based on his experience of where he worked before, remember he has been in his special branch and doing a lot of, he has a lot of experience in other areas, that he knows when information of this nature comes to hand, that it needs to be treated with utmost importance and it's timely, because intelligence of this nature is very timely. You don't allow it to fester. Allow it to linger.
I'll have to cut you there because we have a caller from Arima. Caller, good morning. Are you there?
Morning.
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 Good morning, everybody. Now, officer, I wonder if you could remember when Mr. Alan Scanny Martin had a gun inside of the prison, and one of your fellow officers was killed during the escape.
Yes, I remember. Unfortunately, I remember.
Well, I think from since that time to now, this country has been in a state of emergency.
I could agree.
Last night, watching the news,
I could agree with you.
I want to report a crime to you, because Minister Amin said the insect vector division, the vehicles that they have cannot pass inspection. So we, the taxpayers, especially those who pay property tax, we have been inundated with mosquitoes. That is a crime. I would like you to help us prove, because I can't understand how $60 billion is being spent every year. And some of these basic things that the citizens need to improve the standard of living in this country, we did not get in it. Thanks, and have a good weekend, gentlemen. Stay safe.
Thank you, caller. I'll say this. So I would understand parts of Tobago, which is near certain, water area, water courses and stuff, and I guess parts of Trinidad too. Like, I understand, right? Mosquitoes. That's just the way it is. You can't literally spray out a whole swamp and a whole forest. But urban areas, especially the larger urban areas, because Tobago is, it's you're within nature. There's pros and cons to that. You live with it. But urbanized areas in Trinidad having mosquitoes problems, and I think even my home in Trinidad, it was apparent. You kind of just left wondering what's going on. What's going on here? This isn't very comfortable. But maybe we're too soft. I don't remember mosquitoes being this much of a problem when I was younger.
No. The thing about it is that it's not only about the mosquito that the caller was mentioning, and I agree with him. And it doesn't speak to. It speaks to the majority of our state agencies and the way that we treat our assets. The lack of maintenance and keeping our assets up to par, because it's a lot of money spent on vehicles.
Yeah.
And vehicles and maintenance. And
just like the fire service.
And the sad reality is the amount of money spent on vehicles and maintenance, a number of state enterprises and organizations, they have the most amount of derelict vehicles and the vehicles that are not roadworthy, right? And when you see those vehicles, you ask yourself, well, then where are our money going if these vehicles are kept in this condition and the average citizen are being subjected to a ticketed system and being sent, going by licensing where you have your vehicle inspected every year, and these vehicles have to be roadworthy, but the vehicles that are being used by the state is not even roadworthy. So we're asking ourselves, and I was asking myself, what really going on here?
So, Ashraf, you also have to ask, have the poor road conditions caused some of these state-owned vehicles to, have its roadworthiness deteriorated? Just saying,
yes, Yes,
one could feed into the next.
It contributes to it, but at the same time, I would expect that you lead by example. You don't think so?
Well,
if it is that you are going to tell me I am not supposed to drive with a smooth tire, then I do not expect that the person who is going to issue a ticket to me vehicle has smooth tires on it.
So we have a comment that I want to address really quick. Honduras cuts all Wi-Fi from prisons. Perhaps TNT can follow suit. Now, in this case, Wi-Fi probably is not the correct technical term. Connectivity, right? Can it follow suit? I'm not entirely sure. I know in Port of Spain that's a lot harder than, say, the maximum security prison. In theory it can. I'm not entirely sure why more attempts have not been made. I don't know if Ashraf, you could speak to that. If you're literally thinking Wi-Fi like Wi-Fi at home, no, that's not the issue. It would be mobile data and phone connectivity on the cell phone network. And the problem is, it's not like you could target the phone specifically because they're not supposed to have the phones. The phones are secret.
So the authorities. I heard some time ago, probably earlier, that the president of the Prison Association would have mentioned this same concern that they had with the accessibility of cell phones in the prison system, and he acknowledged that they have some shortcomings within the organization, and right. So he did in fact acknowledge it. So it is not that they're not aware of the criminal elements, but they also indicated that in order they must have more access to a system or the system will allow prisoners the opportunity to make phone calls out of the prison. And that system has failed. So there's no avenue. And I think, from my personal view, there's enough technology available across jurisdictions in terms of prisons that we can look at and see how could we put systems in place to alleviate this type of unofficial communication being done. And if it is that is being done, then I am simply saying that simple. Every call that come out of the prison should be monitored and recorded.
Well, the thing is, so the very, very basic, oversimplistic premise is, as long as prison officers are compromised, whatever measure you have in place will potentially be compromised. The thing is, though, you have to go at least one or two steps further. Compromise doesn't just mean they take a bribe or they're doing it for some sort of gain. Compromise could also mean, A, we threaten your family. A, your brother have a gambling debts. We'll call in those debts. A, your sister have a drug addiction. You never know how the compromise could happen. There's so many ways that it could be done. Having technology that could potentially block everything will also protect officers from being targeted by extortionary practices, threats, blackmail, and the like, or their family, or so on and so on. But so it's not that you have to get the corrupt officers out. not all compromise is because of corruption. You have to prevent the corruption or have a surefire way to block all outside communication, right? I'm not entirely sure how easy the latter is, but the former, that's kind of hard in and of itself, especially given the fact that if they're willing to assassinate people, they're more than willing to do things to corrupt them, to extort and blackmail.
It is, and it's sometimes it's unfair when you make statements about the prison service is corrupt. It means that you're implying that everybody in the prison service is corrupt, and that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate when statements are being made like that. I mean, it's unfortunate when they make statements like that across the board and paint all organizations and everybody with the same brush, which is sad. And any police service is not new. Everybody does get the same paint. But at the same time, like you mentioned, yes, there are circumstances that once it is presented to some of the officers, they may be placed in a very precarious position that it is not about corruption alone, it's about self-preservation of themselves and their family, that they may end up being pushed into a corner to do certain things. So that is a reality of it, and we know that it is not clearly the officer is doing it for his own personal gains. There may be other circumstances. So
we have another comment that I wanted to, and this goes back to the point you were making from before. The word maintenance is not understood in this country. We need more national awareness on this topic, and they list out engineering, infrastructure, environment, asset maintenance, vehicles, buses, fire engines. I would argue cargo ferry. The word maintenance is not well understood.
It is not. It is part of planning. And your planning structure for the in disaster management and critical incident management. That is the planning aspect of it, because your assets, you can't wait for when you need your assets and these type of resources and these specific type of resources, that then you realize, wait, no, the vehicle's not starting anymore. It don't have this part, it don't have that part, and because you can't wait for that time. But maintenance on the whole, it is not just about buying a brand new vehicle or buying brand new equipment. It's about the equipment and ensuring that the equipment, you can get service of that equipment throughout its life, right?
I want to switch gears a bit and at least talk about this because it came out last night. Not that it's groundbreaking news, but at the press conference it was announced the SRPs would be folded into the police service. Your thoughts on that? Because members of the media were asking about, well, the qualifications are different,
and it's very I listened to that, and I was cringing. I felt I could have been on that panel and take those questions, because I had some words. I could have some words for some people there, because the misrepresentation of what an SRP is continues to be presented. These are not officers that are now coming on stream into the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. These are 800 vacancies, and they're absorbing 800. There are more than 800 SRPs currently working in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, because they are full-time SRPs and then they are part-time SRPs. These officers have 10, 15, 20 years plus service within the organization. They have plenty more experience than the junior officers. They have been working in different aspects of policing. Because it's not their fault, there are two avenues to get into the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. There's a special reserve avenue where the requirements are less, because the opportunity there is that once you are a special reserve police officer, you are there to augment the organization. But because of the shortfalls in the police service, special reserve police officers have been working just like regular police officers, but not being given that opportunity or coverage when it comes to all the benefits, vacations, and all the safeguards that our regular police have. Nothing is changing. It just means that the status of the officers within the organization, those 800 officers, will no longer be SRP, but they will be a police constable with a regular number, and they will continue to do what they have been doing for the last 10, 15 years. They are just going to get stability of tenure.
So we have another call on WhatsApp. We'll take the call now. Good morning, caller. You on here?
Good
morning, caller. Go ahead.
Yeah. Good morning.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes. On here? Yeah.
Yes, you're on here.
Good morning, gentlemen. You touched my point about the police, right? Because my son in his service for about 12 years. He there, and when he applied, right? Because he was working all one looking, right? He has his computer. People figure that plenty people is uneducated, you know. They have computer. He could speak Spanish, and you're saying one of the things they watch at now. If you can speak Spanish and you have computer and you have other things, because this is what you need. But everybody keep focusing on maths. How much maths does police want? You understand me? And this is the whole problem. But the idea is getting there and doing your job. Because right now he's in criminology. Right? And we need people to do the work. Because it doesn't make sense that people come in there. Not to care about the nation and so, you know. But it's an easy place for them to get a job. Because there are a lot of people with a lot of qualification. Plenty of people figure it back in the days of school even, you know. But they don't realize there are a lot of educated people. And in the reserve now, you have now, which is people would have been working like national insurance, that comes in and work and do this. People don't really understand, but they are senior officers now who jumbie people. And if you as a young person come in here with certain qualification, better than them, they don't like you, you know. They fight you down. And this is the problem. And the next thing I want to say, when the thing talk about ID card, what people don't realize, how many people we have in the morgue that is dead and nobody can identify them. When your family missing, first place you're going morgue. And this is what happened. ID is important. Because plenty people is getting this one and they think they're missing. There was an accident and nobody know what happened. Because they might have going at some other vehicle with somebody else and they leave one, and it's always tell my truth. If you live in point A to go point B, call and let us know. That's why God gave his cell phone now. Have a blessed day.
Thank you, caller.
Thank you, caller. That phenomenon is not unique to any single entity. You will always find that as progress happens and educational demands increase and people with more qualifications join an organization, some of the experienced older heads who might not have all those qualifications, this is basic human psychology. Some might respond in a reasonable way, and some might feel threatened and be combative.
It's about misinformation and sensationalization of certain topics. The basic the basic requirement entry into the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service currently is 5 subjects. It is not unique to any other organization, right? It's basically 5 subjects inclusive of maths and English. That's just the basic requirement. Basic requirement for a special reserve police officer is 3 subjects, right? There are so that's the basic requirement. There are officers who enter the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service with degrees, right? It does not take away from the fact that the basic entry requirement is 5 subjects. And when people go around saying that police officers are uneducated and they just come out of school even, those are individuals who are ignorant. They are ignorant to the police service. They're self-opinionated and they just remain with that. Basic. We myself included, And I could say I have 2 associates and a bachelor's and a number of other degrees and other certifications that does not require, did not require me to just remain in the police service, because when I came in the police service, I have 8 subjects. I have 8 subjects. I only needed 5. So I have more than your number. Is it that you're going to say that because I have more subjects, I'm not supposed to be here? This is an opportunity, and we have to see the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service not only as a job, as a profession. Police officers, that's a profession. And to get into the profession, the basic requirement is 5 subjects. Until such time, and when you have, Sean, let's put it this way. If you come in with additional experience and additional qualification into an organization, you can only add to the organization, or you should be able to add to the organization and make it a little more diversified. Right?
Well, also, I do wonder if a lot of this comes down to the fact that even with the Media Ambassador program, which does, I think, its general structure and the ambassadors that are picked for the police service have been pretty well thought out, at least in some cases, right? All of the ambassadors I've interacted with, right? Even temporary ones who are not permanent ambassadors. But when you look at 1, the negative public interactions, but also 2, limited positive public interactions. And one of those things are, when you have high profile cases, how does the police communicate those cases, right? And again, we're not saying give away all the information and compromise the prosecution and the investigation. But notice how in other jurisdictions, there are ways in which the police service will communicate to the public in high profile matters to assuage public fears and to reassure people that everything is under control. And that might seem somewhat simplistic, but my point is there's not a lot of work done by the police service to kind of show itself in a positive light. So we don't then get to see the not just the positive examples of those who are courteous and have good customer service skills and tolerate the public when the public is being very miserable to them, but also the expertise and the professionalism and the ability. We don't necessarily always see that unless we are, unfortunately, something bad happens to us, and then, you know, I think in one case you were telling me that the public appreciated the police, and or it was ASP Arun. The public appreciated the officers that initially spoke to them and how they treated the situation. And it's just one of those things where, because I agree with you, I have seen too many examples of well-educated, capable police officers, but it seems as though I see it, but it's not out there in the public, and it's not out there enough, if it is, to whatever extent. And the negative stuff is what goes viral, and the people just kind of take it for granted. And it's one of those weird things where, because look, there was a high level stakeholder meeting about the perception of the police service, you know. So it's just one of those things where I would like to see the service itself do more in a way. This might sound odd, to promote itself.
So there's an argument presented that there are a lot of police officers who have done law and have the law degree. Does a law degree make you a better police officer? That's debatable.
Right.
Because when you are going to do policing, policing is not just about law. It's a social science at the same time. You have to understand communication, sociology, psychology, right? There's a lot more anger management, both from a personal perspective and from interacting with the public customer service. So it's not just about arresting persons and putting them before the court. That is one aspect of policing. There's a lot more that people don't know a police officer has to deal with. So it's not so. But when you look at what we are constantly monitored on is the amount of person that has been arrested and put before the court. And if the matter went before the court, if the person was convicted or otherwise. Conviction does not depend only on the police officer. From a legal perspective, once you go into the court, just like a lawyer has an obligation to defend his clients, and the lawyer will defend its clients based on law. So if a lawyer wins a matter, and they say he's a good lawyer, right? If he loses his matter, is he a bad lawyer, or is it that he did not present a proper case to the court? Why he's not being criticized of being a bad lawyer or a good lawyer, right? Because his profession has certain things that he or she has to do and has to deal with within the judicial system. The police is not required to go into the judicial system and deal with the judiciary. If in a case where you arrest an individual, you present the evidence, the argument in court. So sometimes not because you are police officers who are lawyers, who they say a police officer had to go and study law so they become a better police. That doesn't make you a better police. It'll give you an opportunity to understand how the laws are structured and possibly some of the loopholes and the areas in the law that you need to strengthen to strengthen your case. So when you're going before the courts, these areas have been strengthened. That is why some of the officers do law, and that's why we have officers who are lawyers to assist in getting matters when they go before the courts to cover all the areas that is required to secure a conviction at that point in time. So it's not just about police officers, and I find it's very unfair when people make statements that, but use only a police. Sometimes I just really laugh that you really don't know what it is to be a police officer.
Well, so I can understand why you don't want to raise the requirements, because there will always be those individuals who, look, they might not have the best academic, as you're pointing out, academic credentials does not equate to actually being good at any job. And then this is a job that has the requirements of specific social skills that you're not going to learn in a classroom setting to take a test on.
Absolutely not.
So you don't want to lose out on those salt of the earth people who they're just naturally going to be good at a job like this. They might not know trigonometry, to borrow a phrase, yes, but they're just personality, their natural emotional intelligence, how they perceive the world and interact with the world just might naturally work in a job like this. They might not have 8 passes. They might only have 5, right? Now, because I think one of the things too, when you say it's unfair, it is very pertinent. A lot of politicians are highly educated. Now, I know we say that politicians are stupid, but for whatever reason, it doesn't have the same weight and implications and connotations as when people look down on members of the police service. Because when we say politicians are stupid, it's usually a complaint about a politician who we view as against us. So it's not really an assessment, an accurate assessment of their ability. Rather, it's just a personal attack almost. Whereas with the police service, there's that perception that, hey, they all done see. And all I'm saying is, I don't know, this is the one argument to raise the credentials. By raising the credentials, it's a very direct way to communicate, hey, we actually smart, we can do this. This is not going to change much of the police service if we raise the requirements.
Sean,
because people have the requirements anyway. Sean, but I understand that it's not so simple.
My thing about it is that raising the credentials is insignificant. That is because the reason for this, when you have to go, let's use I want to use an analogy, a very wide analogy. When you go, somebody who wants to be a doctor, what they do What is their requirement to be a doctor? They have to have the basic requirements first, right? To practice medicine. Let me use the correct terminology, to practice medicine. You need the basic requirements. I don't know the full requirements at this point in time, but let me just use it as for discussion purposes. Let's say you need a first degree, right, in medicine, and you went and you go to university and you get your first degree. Fair enough. That only carries you part of the way in terms of the academic aspect of it and having knowledge of the theory. You need to go to the medical school, start to learn what it is to be a medical profession, and to be a medical professional. There are things that they do, customer service, they do crisis management, they do psychology, sociology, because you have to speak to individuals and have empathy towards individuals and have proper communication and at the same time having knowledge of your profession. The same application has to be with the police. In the police, the criteria to enter might just be is only 5 subjects. It does, right? But I think the
problem, Ashraf, is people want to use that as low-hanging fruit to complain about. The reality is the real genesis of practical complaints is the actual interactions that are bad.
That is the problem. So it is not about their qualification. And
no.
It's not about the qualification. You hear the complaints, and I've heard about the complaints and witnessed the complaints. It's about the interaction with the public and how they communicate with the public. That is a challenge, and that I'm saying is not based on academics. It is not based on the level of training in the academy. Sometimes it's all based on the person's personality, and that is a challenge in all organizations, because you go to any customer service oriented organization, you can interact with 3 or 4 different individuals and get different levels of customer service. Some are so professional, some you wonder if this is really a customer service oriented environment. And you question whether or not the organization have proper customer service. They do have, but sometimes the interaction with an individual, when the individual interacts in a negative manner with a customer, and that interaction goes viral, it goes on social media. That is what people remember, because you're posting that on a regular basis. Nobody wants to post from our social media or present a good customer relation, a good interaction with an individual, right? Not always. You may get some, I want to be fair, that some persons do in fact do it, right? But then you keep happen on the negative, because negativity sells, you know.
Yes.
We love to criticize, right? And we don't like constructive criticism. We like to criticize everything because we have the opinion we can do everything better than somebody else and they don't know what they're about. We love to tell people about their job and we don't know. And one of the things I tell this from an equal playing field. There are many persons in Trinidad and Tobago who are drivers on the road, inclusive of police officers. A police officer will tell you about what the proper things to do to drive as a driver, but you are upset because it comes from a police officer. But you as a driver should know the correct thing on the roads of Trinidad and Tobago because you are a user of the road just like a police officer. So why am I supposed to come and tell you, don't break a traffic light? Why? Am I supposed to give you explain to you why not? But you are a driver on the road, just like myself. So this has nothing to do with police officers as against the civilians. We are drivers on the road. And I always use that as an example. I am not speaking to you I may not speak to an individual from a road traffic perspective as a police officer alone. We are drivers. You know the right driving attitude on the road. Why do something different? If it's something outside of that, but we don't like to be scolded and be told that we are doing something wrong, we are always looking for excuse why the wrong thing should be accepted.
In fact, because that is some of the perspectives with regards to North American policing, where the narrative was like, it's all bad. And at some point, you're like, it can't all be bad. If it literally was all bad, then everything would collapse. So some of it has to come from the customer side of the interaction equation, because we have a bad customer service culture, but part of it comes from the customer side, not from the CSR side. Now, which, trust me, I know. Trust me, I know firsthand. I know firsthand. And yes, I am one of those people who tell people how to do their job. I tell politicians how to do their job all the time, and I'm not a politician. I understand the irony of that. It is what it is. That's why I am open. I open myself up to be criticized, and I will take all of the negative calls. If you have complaints and the comments, we'll read it out, and I'll face the music, unlike politicians who like to hide.
That's I've learned when I did my psychology. That is a level that speaks to a level of maturity when you can accept criticism and take it as constructive. That's a level of maturity.
Not all the time. I won't say I can do it all the time.
No, listen. I say that's a level of maturity. I never said that you have reached that ultimate level.
Thank you. Yes, yes. Let's be accurate. We have a comment before we close the show. We'll take a comment. It's back about the maintenance topic. We love the term brand new and then fail on our duties to upkeep such and allow it to deteriorate and look run down. Here's the thing. I very much believe this comment. I don't know if you intended it to be so, but politicians, this is basically how it works. You don't get a photo opportunity if you maintain the bus. You get a photo opportunity when you buy new buses. You don't get a photo opportunity by maintaining the TNT spread. You get a photo opportunity when you buy the APT James. So part of that is very practically true in our culture, and it's very unfortunate. Look, we even had a politician take a photo opportunity for opening a standpipe. Kid you not, right? Same minister, former minister who was afraid of water. Anyway, with that said, thanks to all the commenters and the callers on the topic. We wait, hopefully not too long, on comments from the government. The Prime Minister has a leadership function, whether she is directly involved in something or has authority over something directly or not, because she is the Prime Minister. That alone, but then on top of that, the nature of her branding, of how she positioned herself in her government, in the election, people look to her as a leader. Right now, she is not just the leader because she's elected, but she's the leader that the people chose. She's the leader that they want. So they want her to lead. So hopefully we will see some of that on this issue, because this is an important issue. Thank you, Ashraf, for joining me once again.
No problem.
And interesting curveball, you know? It was almost like if they knew you come on Fridays, so they like to do these things on Fridays.
Well,
all right, folks. Despite the fact that we have an SOE, we're not sure how it will impact our lives just yet. No curfew, but until we know more, do your best to stay safe. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Be your brother's keeper and sister's keeper during times like this. Unfortunately, we should probably do that even more now, given some of the tragedies that we've seen befallen our young people across the country in the last couple of weeks. But never forget, it's nice to be nice. Who knows, maybe if you're nice, you might convince the criminal element to leave you alone. Who knows, right? But stay safe out there so that we can see each other next week. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Get ready for the biggest business-to-business event of the year. The Trade and Investment Convention, happening on July 17th to 19th at the Centre of Excellence in the Koya. Doors open from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on business days and 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Consumer Day. Dress code in effect for business days. Park and ride available from Constantine Park and UETGR North Car Park.